My husband Benjamin introduced his mistress as his assistant during our anniversary trip to Santorini. He didn't know I'd already seen their texts, hired a lawyer, and was about to destroy his entire world over breakfast with a view. The azure. Waters of the Aegean Sea stretched endlessly before us, a perfect backdrop to what should have been a perfect moment. 20 years of marriage, 2 children in college, and a beachfront villa we'd spent a year planning to visit. The morning light cast a golden glow across the white terraces of our private villa, the kind of light photographers chase and tourists pay thousands to experience, but all I could focus on was how. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Benjamin's hand lingered too long on Susan's lower back as he guided her to the breakfast table. My anniversary breakfast table. "Mindy, this is Susan," he'd said the previous evening when we arrived, his voice perfectly practiced. "My new executive assistant. The Davis merger is so critical that I needed her to join us for the first 2 days. I hope you understand." I did understand. I understood everything. I smiled warmly and extended my hand. "Susan, what a pleasure to finally meet you." Her handshake was firm, confident. She was younger than me, of course. Early 30s to my 47. Her blonde hair was styled in that effortless way that actually requires considerable effort, and her sundress revealed toned arms and legs that spoke of regular Pilates sessions. "Mindy, Benjamin has told me so much about you," she gushed. "This place is absolutely amazing. Thank you for understanding how important this merger is." I maintained eye contact, my smile never faltering. "Oh, I understand perfectly. 20 years of marriage teaches you a lot about understanding." If Benjamin detected the edge in my voice, he didn't show it. He was too busy instructing the villa staff about Susan's luggage. Not the small overnight bag you'd expect from an assistant staying briefly, but a full-sized suitcase and matching carry-on. Executive assistant indeed. That night, I slept alone. In our master suite while Benjamin claimed he needed to review documents with Susan in the villa's office. I lay awake listening to the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below, my mind replaying the moment 3 weeks earlier when everything had changed. I'd been looking for our passports in Benjamin's home office when I found the receipt for the villa booking. The reservation clearly stated 1 master suite, 1 additional bedroom. Benjamin had told me he'd booked a 3-bedroom villa to have extra space. It was a small discrepancy, but enough to make me pause. That same evening, Benjamin's phone had chimed repeatedly during dinner. He'd excused himself twice to take calls, claiming they were about the Davis merger. When he went to shower, I did something I'd never done in 20 years of marriage. I looked at his phone. The messages were from Susan Davis Project, but they weren't about business. "Can't wait for Santorini. Bought something special to wear. Just for you. 2 weeks until paradise with you. Arranged for my family emergency leave. No one suspects anything." My hands had trembled as I scrolled through months of messages, each one more damning than the last. There were photos I couldn't unsee, plans for their future, and cruel jokes at my expense. Benjamin, the man who'd held my hand through 2 difficult pregnancies, who'd sworn to love me forever, who'd built a life and family with me, had been systematically deceiving me for over a year. That night, I hadn't cried. Instead, I'd made 3 phone calls. The first was to Carrie, my closest, friend since college and a partner at her law firm. "I need the best divorce attorney in the state," I'd told her, my voice steady. "Mindy, what happened?" she'd asked, shock evident in her voice. "Benjamin is having an affair with someone named Susan. They're planning to run away together after he secures the Davis merger. I need someone ruthless." The second call was to our financial advisor, requesting comprehensive documentation of all our assets, particularly those Benjamin managed through his investment firm. The third call was to Johnny, a private investigator Carrie had recommended. Within a week, he'd provided me with a detailed dossier. Timestamps of meetings between Benjamin and Susan that weren't on any corporate calendar, hotel receipts, photos of them together, and most importantly, evidence of Benjamin moving company, funds through offshore accounts. Benjamin wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to leave with millions that weren't his to take. So when he announced that his assistant needed to join our anniversary trip, I simply smiled and agreed. The final pieces were falling into place. Now, as the morning of our anniversary dawned bright and clear, I sipped my coffee and watched them from across the terrace. They thought they were being discreet. A brief touch of hands, meaningful glances, inside jokes thinly disguised as business banter. Susan kept calling him Mr. Harrington in a way that somehow sounded intimate. My phone vibrated with a text from Carrie. "We landed, 30 minutes out. Everything in place?" I typed back, "Yes, Villa Gates are expecting you. Abe has the financial documents?" "All of it. This will be quick and clean. You okay?" I looked up at Benjamin, who caught my eye and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To 20 amazing years," he called over, his smile not quite reaching, his eyes. Susan fidgeted with her napkin, unable to meet my gaze. "Never better," I replied to Carrie. I set my phone down and stood, smoothing the front of my white linen dress. "Benjamin, I'm going to freshen up before breakfast. I've arranged a special anniversary surprise." His expression flickered with something, guilt? Concern? Before he nodded. "Of course, darling. Should I open the champagne?" "Absolutely," I said. "This is definitely a moment worth celebrating." As I walked inside, I heard Susan whisper, "She seems so calm. Do you think she knows anything?" Benjamin's response floated after me. "Impossible. Mindy doesn't have a suspicious bone in her body. Trust me, she's completely clueless." I smiled. To myself as I touched up my lipstick in the bathroom mirror. In exactly 27 minutes, Carrie would arrive with Abe, the forensic accountant who'd traced Benjamin's financial maneuvers, and Joel, the divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving financial fraud. Benjamin had no idea that while he was planning his new life with Susan, I'd been methodically documenting his affair and his embezzlement. The Davis merger he was so focused on? I'd already spoken with the actual Davis family, who were appalled to learn what their potential business partner was doing behind the scenes. I checked my watch. 25 minutes until the doorbell would ring. 25 minutes until Benjamin's perfectly constructed house of lies would come crashing down around him. 25 minutes until he discovered that the wife he'd dismissed as completely clueless had outplayed him at every turn. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to return to the terrace for the last breakfast I would ever share with my husband of 20 years. The game was almost over, and he had no idea he'd already lost. I returned to the terrace with a renewed sense of calm. Benjamin was pouring champagne into crystal flutes, while Susan pretended to review documents on her tablet. The domesticity of the scene might have been convincing if I hadn't known better. "There she is," Benjamin announced, raising a glass toward me. "To 20 years with the most understanding wife a man could ask for." Susan smiled tightly, lifting her glass with visible discomfort. I accepted my flute and took a deliberate sip, savoring not just the champagne, but the moment. In 20 minutes, everything would change. "A toast to understanding," I agreed, my voice steady. "And to truth." Something in my tone must have registered with Benjamin because his smile faltered slightly. "Truth?" "Yes," I said, holding his gaze. "I've always valued honesty above all else in our marriage. Don't you agree?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As I looked at his familiar face, the crinkles around his blue eyes, the distinguished gray at his temples that had once made my heart flutter, I found myself searching for the man I had married. Where had that person gone? Or had he always been capable of this level of deception? My mind drifted back to how our story began, long before the betrayal. We met during my final year of graduate school. I was working on my MBA, pulling an all-nighter in the university library when Benjamin sat down at my table. He was 30, already successful at his investment firm, taking night classes to expand his expertise. He'd asked to borrow my economics textbook, and somehow that led to coffee, which led to dinner, which led to a life together. Benjamin had been charming, ambitious, and attentive. He listened when I talked about my dreams of starting my own marketing consultancy. He supported me through the early failures and celebrated the eventual successes. When I became pregnant with our daughter Bree, he painted the nursery himself and read parenting books without prompting. 3 years later, when our son was born, he seemed equally devoted. The Benjamin that I married would come home early to attend school plays and soccer games. He remembered birthdays and anniversaries without reminders. He held my hand during my father's funeral and patiently cared for my mother when she moved in, with us briefly during her cancer treatment. For years, we were a team. Or so I thought. The change had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first. More late nights at the office, increased business travel, a growing emotional distance that I attributed to midlife stress. I'd tried to bridge the gap, planning date nights, suggesting therapy, even proposing this anniversary trip to reconnect, all while he was building a separate life with Susan. "You're quiet this morning," Benjamin commented, pulling me back to the present. "Everything okay?" I smiled and gestured toward the breathtaking view. "Just taking it all in. It's not every day we celebrate 20 years together in such a beautiful place." Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Perhaps I should give you two some privacy for your celebration. I can review these projections in my room." "Nonsense," I said smoothly. "The Davis merger is too important to put on hold, even for our anniversary. Isn't that right, Benjamin?" He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Exactly. Thank you for understanding, Mindy. Besides," I continued, "I've invited some colleagues to join us this morning. They should be arriving any minute." Benjamin set down his champagne, confusion crossing his face. "Colleagues? Who would you know in Santorini?" "Oh, they flew in specially," I replied, "for our anniversary." Before he could question me further, a staff member approached the terrace. "Excuse me, Mrs. Harrington. Your guests have arrived." Benjamin frowned. "Mindy, what's going on? We didn't discuss." "It's my surprise," I interrupted, standing to greet my visitors. "And they're right on time." The confusion on Benjamin's face transformed into shock as Carrie appeared on the terrace, followed by Abe carrying a briefcase and Joel with a leather document folder. "Carrie?" Benjamin stood abruptly. "What are you doing here?" My friend smiled coolly. "Supporting Mindy as always." She turned to me. "Everything's ready." Susan looked between Benjamin and the newcomers, her professional demeanor cracking. "Ben? What's happening?" The casual use of Ben, a nickname I'd never used, was the final confirmation, though I hardly needed it anymore. "Susan," I said calmly, "I believe you've been introduced as Benjamin's executive assistant. Allow me to introduce my team. This is Carrie Wilson, my friend and legal consultant, Abe Gordon, forensic accountant, and Joel Blackwood, divorce attorney." The color drained from Benjamin's face. "Divorce attorney? Mindy, this is absurd. Whatever you think is happening." "What's happening?" I cut him off. "Is that I know everything. About your affair with Susan. About the money you've been moving offshore. About your plans after the Davis merger. Susan stood so quickly her chair toppled backward. Ben, you said she didn't know. She didn't. She couldn't. Benjamin stammered, looking wildly between Susan and me. I nodded to Joel, who placed the document folder on the table. Actually, I know quite a lot, including the fact that you and Susan have been planning this for over a year, that you've booked one-way tickets to Bali for next month, that you've purchased property there under a shell company. Abe stepped forward, opening his briefcase. We also have complete documentation of the $2.3 million you've diverted from client accounts, Mr. Harrington. Benjamin's face contorted with anger. You've been spying on me? Checking my private communications? That's unethical, I suggested. Dishonest? Betrayal of trust? Please, tell me more about ethics and honesty while sitting next to your mistress on our anniversary trip. The champagne flute slipped from his hand, shattering on the terrace tiles. No one moved to clean it up. You've made a terrible mistake, Benjamin hissed, his charming facade completely gone. You have no idea what you're doing. I smiled, feeling strangely calm in the eye of the storm. That's where you're wrong, Benjamin. For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing. The terrace fell into tense silence. Benjamin's face cycled through emotions, shock, anger, fear, before settling into something calculating. I recognized this expression from business negotiations. He was recalibrating, looking for leverage. Mindy, he said, lowering his voice, to the soothing tone he used when trying to manage difficult situations. Let's discuss this privately. Whatever you think you know, I can explain. Susan stood frozen, her professional mask completely shattered. I should go, she whispered. Stay. Exactly where you are, I said firmly. You've been part of this deception. You'll be part of its unraveling. Carrie placed a hand on my shoulder in silent support, while Joel opened his folder and extracted a thick document. Mr. Harrington, Joel began, his voice clinically professional. This is a petition for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. We have substantial evidence supporting both claims. Benjamin ignored him, focusing solely on me. 20 years of marriage, and this is how you handle a rough patch? Ambushing me on vacation with lawyers? What about counseling? What about thinking of our children? The mention of Bree and Johnny, our children named for my late parents, ignited a flash of anger I'd been carefully controlling. Don't you dare bring them into this, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Not when you were planning to abandon them along with me. Before Benjamin could respond, I nodded to Abe, who connected his tablet to the terrace's outdoor display screen, a feature we'd specifically requested for enjoying vacation photos. The screen flickered to life, showing a detailed financial flowchart. 3 months ago, I continued, I found the first discrepancy, a wire transfer to a Cayman account I didn't recognize. I might have dismissed it, except it happened the same weekend you claimed to be at a conference in Toronto. Benjamin's eyes darted to the screen, then back to me. You had no right to access my financial records. Joint accounts, Benjamin. My name is on everything except your personal slush fund, which, unfortunately for you, you used company resources to establish. I gestured to the screen where Abe was now displaying bank statements. That's when I hired Johnny. Who's Johnny? Benjamin demanded. The private investigator who documented your affair, I replied calmly. He was particularly thorough. The screen changed to show photographs. Benjamin and Susan entering a hotel in Miami, having dinner in Chicago, kissing in the elevator of a New York high-rise. Each image was time-stamped and geotagged, matching perfectly with Benjamin's supposed business trips, Susan gasped. You had us followed? Not initially, I said. At first, I just wanted to understand the financial discrepancies. The affair was a bonus discovery. Benjamin stood abruptly. This is harassment, invasion of privacy. Your lawyer will advise you to cooperate fully, Joel interrupted, especially once they understand the extent of your financial misconduct. Abe cleared his throat. Mr. Harrington, over the past 14 months, you've diverted approximately $2.3 million from client investment accounts through a series of sophisticated but ultimately traceable transactions. The money was routed through 3 shell companies before landing in offshore accounts under the control of a trust benefiting you and, he glanced at Susan, certain other parties. The blood drained from Benjamin's face. That's not... What happened? He stammered. Those were legitimate investments. In a Balinese villa? I asked quietly. In artwork purchased under Susan's maiden name? In cryptocurrency that mysteriously disappeared from client portfolios? Benjamin's eyes narrowed. How long have you been planning this? The question made me laugh despite everything. Planning this? I wasn't planning anything until I discovered you were stealing from your clients and preparing to leave me for your executive assistant. I reached for my phone and pulled up the text messages I'd discovered weeks earlier. I read aloud. Once the Davis deal closes, we'll have everything we need. 2 more months, and we're free. I looked up at him. Your words to Susan, sent, the night before our daughter's graduation. You missed her speech to have dinner with Susan in Boston. Susan sank back into her chair, her composure completely shattered. You said your wife knew about us, she whispered to Benjamin. You said it was an arrangement, that she was fine with it as long as you were discreet. I turned to her, genuinely surprised. Is that what he told you? She nodded miserably. He said you had an understanding, that you were only staying together, for appearances and for your kids. The revelation shouldn't have hurt, not after everything else. But it did. 20 years reduced to appearances, our children reduced to obligations. Well, I said, gathering myself, it seems we've all been deceived in different ways. Benjamin slammed his hand on the table. Enough! This is between Mindy and me. Everyone else needs to leave, now. Actually, Carrie interjected smoothly, this is no longer just between you and Mindy. The financial evidence Abe has gathered has already been shared with the SEC and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Benjamin went completely still. You did what? You didn't just betray me, I said quietly. You betrayed your client's trust. People who worked their entire lives to save for retirement, for their children's education. People who believed in you. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in Benjamin's eyes. Not the fear of losing his comfortable life or his reputation, but the fear of real consequences. This isn't necessary, he said, his voice losing its commanding edge. We can work something out. Keep this private. Joel shook his head. I'm afraid that's not possible. The authorities are quite interested in the pattern of transactions Mr. Gordon has documented. This extends beyond a divorce matter. Benjamin turned to me, desperation replacing his earlier confidence. Mindy, think about what you're doing. Think about our family. If this goes public, if there are charges... I have thought about our family, I interrupted. For 20 years, our family was my priority. It should have been yours too. Susan stood shakily. I didn't know about the financial issues. I swear I didn't know he was taking money. Whether I believed her or not was irrelevant. Her complicity in destroying my marriage was enough. Perhaps, I said, but you knew he was married. You knew. He had children. And you chose to participate in the deception anyway. The staff appeared at the edge of the terrace, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. Mrs. Harrington, would you like breakfast to be served now? The ordinary question in this extraordinary moment nearly made me laugh again. I glanced at my watch, barely 9:30 in the morning, and my entire life had already transformed. Yes, I said, surprising everyone. Please serve breakfast. This might take a while. As the staff arranged platters of fresh fruit, pastries, and local delicacies on the table, I felt an odd sense of clarity. The worst had happened. The betrayal was exposed. And somehow, I was still standing. The absurdity of eating breakfast while dismantling my marriage wasn't lost on me. Yet there was something powerful about maintaining this semblance of normalcy, as if to say, even this betrayal couldn't completely derail me. I spread jam on a piece of toast, my actions deliberate and calm. You know what's interesting, Benjamin? I keep thinking about timing. Benjamin sat rigid in his chair, barely touching his food. What do you mean? Your affair with Susan began 14 months ago, according to Johnny's investigation. The same month I was considering expanding my consultancy overseas. I took a measured bite of toast. The same month I mentioned possibly moving us to London for a year while I established the new office. His eyes flickered with recognition. That's when it started, wasn't it? When I suggested a change that would inconvenience you. When I wanted to pursue my goals instead of just supporting yours. Carrie watched the exchange carefully, while Abe continued quietly documenting financial information on his tablet. Joel maintained a professional distance, observing rather than interrupting. That's ridiculous, Benjamin said, but his denial lacked conviction. My relationship with Susan has nothing to do with your career. Susan shifted uncomfortably. Ben, you told me Mindy's career was just a hobby for her, that she wasn't serious about the international expansion. I turned to her, genuinely curious now. What else did he tell you about me? She hesitated, glancing at Benjamin, who subtly shook his head. Go ahead, I encouraged. I think we're beyond secrets now. Susan straightened slightly. He said you were cold, distant, that you were more interested in your work than your marriage, that you hadn't been intimate in years. The familiar sting of betrayal hit again, but differently this time. These weren't just lies about arrangements or understandings. These were deliberate distortions of who I was as a person, as a wife? Interesting, I replied, my voice remarkably steady. Especially since I planned this entire anniversary trip as a surprise. Booked your favorite activities. Even packed that blue dress you always said you loved. Benjamin stared at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. But let's get back to timing, I continued. Because there's something even more interesting than when your affair started. I nodded to Abe, who switched the display to show a series of financial documents. The first significant transfer of client funds occurred 3 months after your affair began. Not immediately, which suggests this wasn't your original plan. Something changed. Benjamin's jaw tightened. I don't have to listen to this amateur psychological analysis. Actually, you do, Joel interjected smoothly. Because understanding motive will be crucial to any potential settlement negotiations. I studied Benjamin's face, the face I'd woken up next to for 20 years. What happened 3 months in, Benjamin? What changed? When he remained silent, Carrie slid a document across the table. Perhaps this will help refresh your memory. A medical report from Dr. Klein's office. Benjamin's head snapped up, his eyes widening with recognition. Dr. Klein is my gynecologist, I explained to Susan, whose confusion was evident. 11 months ago, I went to see her because I was experiencing unusual symptoms. She ran tests for early menopause. Susan looked increasingly uncomfortable. I don't see how this is relevant to... The tests were negative, I continued. But Benjamin didn't wait for the results, did he? The moment he heard potential menopause, something shifted in his calculation. That's absurd, Benjamin snapped. But the flush creeping up his neck told me I'd hit a nerve. The day after my appointment, you opened the first offshore account, I said, pointing to the timeline on the screen. 2 days later, you purchased the Balinese property. A week after that, you mentioned Susan for the first time, your brilliant new executive assistant with so much potential. I turned back to Susan. You're 34, correct? Perfect age for starting a family. Susan's eyes darted to Benjamin, who was now visibly sweating despite the pleasant morning temperature. He promised you children, didn't he? I asked quietly. The gyne. Shock on her face confirmed my suspicion. How could you possibly know that? She whispered. Because I know Benjamin, I replied simply. And I know what he values: status, youth, legacy. I gestured for Abe to continue the presentation. The screen displayed a series of text messages between Benjamin and Susan, carefully organized by date. I want to build something real with you, I read from one of Benjamin's messages. A home, a family, a future untainted by mistake, and regret. Benjamin lunged for the display controls, but Carrie smoothly intercepted him. These messages were obtained legally, Mr. Harrington, she reminded him. From accounts linked to company devices paid for by your firm, which has a clearly stated policy about personal use. As Benjamin sank back into his chair, I continued. Reading. Once we're settled, we can start trying for a baby right away. I've always wanted a son. I couldn't help but laugh at that one. We have a son, Benjamin, Johnny. He's 19 and hasn't heard from you in 3 weeks. For the first time, genuine shame crossed Benjamin's face. It was brief, quickly replaced by defensiveness, but I caught it. This is all being taken out of context, he insisted. Then please, provide the context, I invited. Explain how stealing client funds and abandoning your family fits into some greater narrative I'm missing. When he remained silent, Susan surprised me by speaking up. I think I need to understand something, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Ben, you told me your marriage was essentially over, that you were staying together for appearances until your children were established. You said Mindy knew about us. Benjamin shifted uncomfortably. I may have simplified the situation. Simplified? Susan's voice rose. You showed me divorce papers. You said you'd filed months ago and were just working through the financial settlement. This was new information. I looked at Joel, who raised an eyebrow. We have no record of any divorce filing, he confirmed. Benjamin's deception was unraveling on multiple fronts. The carefully constructed narrative he'd created for Susan was collapsing alongside the facade he'd maintained with me. I was going to file, he insisted. After the Davis merger, everything was planned. Planned around your financial interests, I noted, not around honesty or respect for either of us. Susan stood abruptly. I need some air. As she hurried from the terrace, Benjamin moved to follow her, but Joel stepped into his path. Mr. Harrington, leaving now would be inadvisable. There are serious matters we need to discuss regarding your financial activities. Benjamin's face hardened as he looked from Joel to me. You've been planning this for weeks, haven't you? This whole trip was a setup. No, I said truthfully. This trip was genuinely meant to be our anniversary celebration. I only decided to confront you here after I discovered you were bringing Susan along. I paused, allowing myself a small smile. Though I must admit, having you both in one place has proven quite efficient. Benjamin slumped back into his chair, the realization of his position finally sinking in. He wasn't just facing a divorce, he was potentially facing criminal charges. His carefully constructed exit strategy was disintegrating before his eyes. What do you want? He asked finally, his voice hollow. I set down my coffee cup and met his gaze directly. I want what I've always wanted, Benjamin. Honesty, respect, justice. For the first time that morning, there was nothing calculated in his expression, only the dawning recognition of just how completely he had underestimated me. The villa staff cleared our barely touched breakfast in uncomfortable silence. Benjamin sat across from me, no longer the confident, charming man who had controlled our marriage for 2 decades, but someone cornered and calculating his remaining options. After they left, Joel placed a thick document folder in front of Benjamin. These are the divorce papers. I suggest you review them with your attorney present, but the key points are straightforward. Equal division of legitimate marital assets, full disclosure of all diverted funds, and a comprehensive alimony structure. Benjamin didn't touch the folder. And if I refuse? Then we proceed to court, Carrie interjected, where the financial evidence will become part of public record. Given the nature of your business, I imagine your clients would be particularly interested in how you've managed their investments. Benjamin's eyes narrowed. You're blackmailing me. No, I said calmly. I'm giving you a choice. Handle this privately with some dignity and tact, or fight and lose everything, including your freedom. A tense silence settled over the terrace. The beautiful Santorini backdrop felt increasingly surreal against the ugliness of our conversation. I need to speak with Mindy alone, Benjamin finally said, his tone less demanding than before. Joel looked at me questioningly. I nodded. It's fine. We'll have a moment. Carrie squeezed my shoulder as she stood. We'll be just inside if you need us. After they left, Benjamin and I faced each other across the table. 20 years of history suspended between us. The warm breeze carried the scent of bougainvillea and salt water, reminders of what should have been a romantic anniversary instead of this wreckage. Why did you do it this way? Benjamin asked, his voice lower now. Why the public humiliation? You could have confronted me privately. The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Public humiliation? There are 6 people here, Benjamin. I could have done this in our corporate boardroom. I could have sent the evidence to every client in your portfolio. I could have called our children and your parents before confronting you. He flinched at the mention of our children. They don't know? Not yet, I admitted, though they'll have to soon. For a moment, genuine pain crossed his face. Then his expression hardened again. This financial investigation, it's excessive. Vindictive. It wasn't part of my original plan, I said truthfully. I hired Johnny to confirm my suspicions about the affair. The financial fraud he uncovered was unexpected. It's not fraud, Benjamin insisted, leaning forward. It's aggressive investment strategy. Everything can be explained. To the SEC? To the FBI? I shook my head. 3 separate forensic accountants have reviewed the documentation, Benjamin. What you've done goes beyond creative accounting. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times during our marriage. I can fix this. I just need time. Time for what? To hide more assets? To create a better cover story? I studied him, searching for any trace of the man I thought I'd married. Do you even feel remorse? Not for getting caught, but for what you've done? Benjamin met my gaze, and for the first time that morning, I saw a flicker of the sincerity I remembered from our early years. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I replied quietly, deliberately and repeatedly. He looked away first. What happens now? That depends on you, I said. The divorce is non-negotiable. So is the financial restitution. But how painful? This becomes how public. That's your choice. Benjamin's shoulders slumped slightly. And Susan? The question rekindled my anger. Even now, in the midst of his downfall, she remained a priority. Susan can make her own decisions, I said coldly. Though I imagine finding out you've lied to her as systematically as you've lied to me might influence them. As if summoned by her name, Susan appeared at the edge of the terrace. She'd clearly been crying, her professional polish completely shattered. I've called for a car, she announced, her voice unsteady. I'm leaving. Benjamin stood quickly. Susan, wait. We need to talk about this. No, we don't, she replied, wrapping her arms around herself. You've been lying to me from the beginning. There is no divorce in process. There is no understanding with your wife. There's just... She gestured vaguely at the documents scattered. Across the table, this disaster you've created. I watched their exchange with detached interest, as if observing characters in a play rather than the 2 people who had conspired to destroy my marriage. It's complicated, Benjamin insisted, reaching for her hand. Yes, I've made mistakes, but my feelings for you are real. Susan stepped back from his touch. Are they? Or am I just the next vessel for your fantasies? The younger woman who could give you more children? The adoring assistant who wouldn't challenge your decisions the way your accomplished wife might? Her insight surprised me. In the midst of her own pain, Susan had grasped something fundamental about Benjamin that had taken me years to see. His need for admiration outweighed his capacity for genuine partnership. That's unfair, Benjamin protested. But the argument sounded hollow even to my ears. Is it? Susan's voice hardened. You told me Mindy was cold and distant and focused only on her career, but she planned this entire anniversary trip for you. She's been fighting for your marriage while you've been planning to abandon it. She turned to me unexpectedly. I'm sorry, Mindy. I truly believed your marriage was over. The sincerity in her apology caught me off guard. I had cast Susan as a willing accomplice, but perhaps she had been manipulated as skillfully as I had been. Differently, but just as thoroughly. Thank you, I said simply, unsure what else to offer. Susan nodded before turning back to Benjamin. The financial issues, were those real? Have you actually been taking money? Benjamin's expression shuddered. That's a complicated business, matter that's being misrepresented. It's a yes or no question, Ben. When he didn't answer, Susan nodded as if confirming something to herself. That's what I thought. She picked up her purse from where she'd left it earlier. Goodbye, Ben. I hope whatever you were searching for was worth what you're about to lose. As she walked away, Benjamin seemed torn between following her and continuing our conversation. His hesitation spoke volumes. Go, I said, surprising myself. Try to salvage whatever you can there. We're done for now. He looked at me with genuine confusion. You're letting me leave? I'm not your keeper, Benjamin. I never was. I gestured toward the villa entrance. But when you're done, we still have divorce papers to discuss. And the small matter of the financial investigation won't disappear, regardless of what happens with Susan. For a moment, he seemed about to say something else. Perhaps another justification or plea. Instead, he nodded once and hurried after Susan. I remained at the table, surrounded by the evidence of Benjamin's betrayal and my own methodical response to it. The morning sun had risen higher, casting shorter shadows across the terrace. Somewhere, below, waves continued to crash against the cliffs, indifferent to human drama. I pulled out my phone and texted Carrie. Benjamin's gone after Susan. I'd like a moment alone. Her reply came instantly. Are you sure? We can stay nearby. I'm sure, I typed back. I need to think. For the first time since discovering Benjamin's betrayal, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened and what was still to come. 20 years of marriage, 2 children who would be devastated, a shared life dismantled by lies. Yet beneath the grief, a strange sense of clarity was emerging. I had survived the worst of it, the discovery, the confrontation, the truth, however, painful. What came next would be on my terms. I remained alone on the terrace, watching clouds drift across the impossibly blue Aegean sky. There was something almost therapeutic about the contrast. The beauty of Santorini against the ugliness, of betrayal, the peacefulness of the setting against the turmoil of my marriage. Footsteps behind me announced Carrie's return. She sat beside me, saying nothing but offering her presence. We'd been friends since our first day of college, roommates who became family. She'd been my maid of honor at my wedding to Benjamin, godmother to our daughter, and now witness to the end of it all. How are you holding up? She finally asked. Strangely calm, I admitted. I thought I'd feel more something, vindication, satisfaction. Instead, I just feel free, she suggested. The word resonated. Yes, free. We sat in comfortable silence before Carrie spoke again. Abe's been going through more records. The situation is worse than we initially thought. Worse how? Benjamin hasn't just been moving his own clients' money. He's been accessing portfolios throughout the firm. The total is closer to $5 million. I closed my eyes, absorbing this new information. Does Joel think this changes our strategy? It strengthens our position, she said, but it also increases the likelihood of criminal charges, regardless of what we decide to do. The gravity of the situation settled over me. What had begun as a confrontation about infidelity had evolved into something with far-reaching consequences beyond our marriage. I never wanted this, I said quietly. I just wanted the truth. Carrie squeezed my hand. I know, but Benjamin made these choices, not you. You're just bringing them to light. The sound of raised voices drifted from inside the villa. Benjamin had returned, and from the sound of it, his conversation with Susan hadn't gone well. I deserve a chance to explain. His voice carried through the open doors. Moments later, he stormed onto the terrace, his composed facade completely shattered. His face was flushed, his designer shirt rumpled. She's leaving, he announced, as if I should share his distress. She won't even listen to me. I regarded him calmly. And that surprises you? He paced the terrace, running his hands through his hair. This is your fault. You've turned everyone against me with these exaggerations and misrepresentations. I've only presented facts, Benjamin. Documents, records, your own messages. I gestured to the table where the evidence still lay. If the truth turns people against you, perhaps the problem isn't with the truth. He stopped pacing and faced me directly. What do you want from me, Mindy? What will it take to make this go away? It doesn't go away, I said evenly. That's not how this works. Joel and Abe rejoined us on the terrace, their expressions grave. Joel placed a revised document on the table. Mr. Harrington, in light of new information, we've amended the settlement proposal. Given the extent of the financial irregularities, we believe this represents a fair resolution that might help mitigate some of the potential criminal consequences. Benjamin snatched up the document, scanning it quickly. His face paled. This is robbery. You want me to surrender my entire stake in the firm? The firm you've been stealing from? I countered. Yes, that seems appropriate. You can't do this, he hissed. Half the firm is mine. I built it. And now you've compromised it, Joel said calmly. The evidence suggests you've been using your position to misappropriate client funds on a scale that could destroy the entire company if it becomes public. Benjamin turned to me, his expression now desperate. Mindy, be reasonable. Think about our children. Think about their inheritance, their future. If I lose my position, if there are legal consequences, I am thinking about our children, I replied steadily. About the example I set for them. About teaching them that actions have consequences, even for people with power and privilege. His desperation shifted to anger. So this is revenge. You're punishing me for Susan. No, I said, maintaining my composure. Susan is a symptom, not the disease. This is about 20 years of partnership that meant nothing to you when it became inconvenient. This is about the vows you broke, the trust you betrayed, and the family you were willing to abandon. I made mistakes, he conceded, his voice softer now. Terrible mistakes, but destroying everything we've built together won't fix that. I'm not destroying anything, Benjamin. You did that the moment you decided our marriage, our family, and your professional ethics were acceptable collateral damage for your midlife crisis. For a moment, genuine pain flashed across his face. Then his expression hardened again. I need to call my lawyer. Of course, Joel said, handing him a business card. He can contact me directly to discuss next steps. Benjamin took the card, then looked at me again. And what about us? Our anniversary trip? Are you staying here? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. The anniversary of what exactly? A marriage you've been systematically dismantling for over a year? 20 years still happened, Mindy. Whatever you think of me now, we built a life together. Yes, we did, I acknowledged. And I'll treasure those memories. But I won't pretend we're celebrating when there's nothing left to celebrate. He nodded slowly, finally seeming to accept the reality of our situation. I'll have my things moved to another hotel. That would be best. As Benjamin turned to leave, I found myself calling after him. Benjamin. He paused, looking back with a flicker of hope in his eyes. When you speak to Bree and Johnny, and you should be the one to tell them, please leave me out of your explanations. Don't make me the villain in your story. They deserve the truth, even if it's difficult. Something shifted in his expression, perhaps the first genuine moment of accountability I'd seen. I'll try, he said quietly. For what it's worth, Mindy, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. He left without waiting for my response, which was good because I didn't have one to give. 20 years of marriage, and I am sorry, was all that remained. After he was gone, Joel turned to me. He'll fight the settlement. They always do at first. I know, I said. But he'll come around when he realizes the alternatives are worse. Carrie sat beside me again. What? Now? I looked out at the breathtaking view, the infinity pool seeming to merge with the sea below, the white buildings cascading down the cliffside, the perfect blue sky. I had spent months planning this trip, imagining romantic dinners and rekindled connection. Now, I said, making a decision, I'm going to enjoy my vacation. She raised an eyebrow. Here? With everything that's happened? Why not? I've paid for this spectacular villa for 2 weeks. The views are incredible. The food is amazing. And for the first time in years, I don't have to pretend everything is fine when it isn't. I turned to her with a small smile. Stay with me. We'll make it a girls' trip instead of an anniversary celebration. Carrie laughed, clearly surprised by my suggestion. Are you sure? Completely. Benjamin doesn't get to take this too. I gestured toward the horizon. Besides, I think I could use a friend right now. She squeezed my hand. Then I'm staying. I felt a weight lifting. Not everything, not all at once, but enough to breathe more freely. The confrontation was over. The truth was out. What remained was rebuilding, and for the first time in months, that future didn't terrify me. Joel, Abe, I said, turning to them. Thank you for everything today. I know we still have work to do, but perhaps we could continue tomorrow? I think I'd like to take a swim and pretend to be on vacation for a few hours. Joel nodded, gathering his documents. Of course. We'll continue when you're ready. As they left us alone on the terrace, Carrie looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. Are you really okay? I considered the question carefully. No, I admitted. Not yet, but I will be. And for the first time since discovering Benjamin's betrayal, I truly believed it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the infinity pool as I floated on my back, eyes closed against the brilliant blue sky. The cool water enveloped me, providing a momentary escape from the morning's intensity. For the first time in months, I was breathing without the weight of suspicion and uncertainty pressing on my chest. Nearby, Carrie sat at the edge of the pool, her feet dangling in the water as she fielded calls from her office. She had rearranged her entire schedule to stay with me, handing off cases and postponing meetings without hesitation. It was the kind of friendship that defied measurement, solid, and unwavering through decades of life's complications. The firm's in an uproar, she said, setting down her phone after the 5th call. Word's getting out about Benjamin's activities. I adjusted my position to tread water. How bad is it? Bad enough. The senior partners are calling an emergency meeting, Several major clients have already requested audits of their accounts. She hesitated. Joel thinks Benjamin might be facing arrest within the week. The news should have shocked me, but I felt oddly detached. I never wanted that, I said quietly. I just wanted honesty. I know, Carrie replied. But financial fraud, at this level, it was always going to end this way once it came to light. I swam to the edge of the pool and pulled myself up to sit beside her. Water dripped from my hair and swimsuit, creating dark patches on the sun-warmed stone. Do you think I went too far? I asked, voicing the question that had been lingering at the edges of my mind. With the financial investigation, the lawyers, all of it? Carrie considered the question seriously. Do you? I don't know, I admitted. When I first found those messages, I was just looking for the truth about the affair. The financial aspects, that was unexpected. Once I knew, though, I couldn't unknow it. You didn't create the situation, Mindy. You just exposed it. But now our children will have a father with potential criminal charges. The company he helped build might collapse. People could lose their jobs, their savings. Carrie turned to face me directly. Benjamin made those choices, not you. He betrayed not just your marriage, but the trust of his clients and colleagues. That's not on you. Intellectually, I knew she was right. Still, the magnitude of what was unfolding felt overwhelming. My personal heartbreak had expanded into something with far-reaching consequences. I pulled my knees to my chest, watching the water ripple across the infinity edge of the pool, seemingly merging with the sea beyond. I keep thinking about what I missed. There must have been signs before the text messages, before the financial discrepancies. Maybe there were, Carrie acknowledged. But that doesn't make this your fault. Not my fault, but perhaps my responsibility. As his partner, as someone who shared his life. Stop, Carrie said firmly. This is exactly what men like Benjamin count on. Women taking responsibility for their actions. You are not responsible for his choices. Her words cut through my spiraling thoughts. She was right, of course. The habit of taking on Benjamin's emotions, his responsibilities, his needs. It was deeply ingrained after 20 years together. Breaking that pattern would be part of my recovery. I need to call the kids, I said, knowing I couldn't delay the difficult conversation any longer, before they hear rumors or see something online. Do you want me to give you some privacy? I shook my head. Stay, please. After changing into dry clothes, I sat on the terrace with my phone, trying to formulate what I would say to our children. How do you tell your daughter and son that their father has betrayed not just your marriage, but potentially his professional ethics as well? What words could possibly prepare them for the public fallout that might follow? I dialed Bree's number. First. She was the older of our two children at 21, studying architecture at a university on the West Coast. She answered on the third ring. Hey, Mom, how's the anniversary trip? Is Santorini as amazing as the pictures? Her cheerful voice made my heart clench. Sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important. Is this a good time? The change in my tone registered immediately. What's wrong? Are you and Dad okay? We're both physically fine, I assured her quickly, but there have been some developments that you need to know about. You're scaring me, Mom. I took a deep breath. Your father and I are separating. I've initiated divorce proceedings. Silence stretched across the line. Then, what? Why? I thought you guys were on this romantic second honeymoon thing. I thought so too, I said gently. But I've discovered some things that make it impossible for our marriage to continue. I explained as calmly and factually as I could. The affair with Susan, the financial irregularities, the confrontation that morning. I didn't share every detail, but I provided enough truth for her to understand the gravity of the situation. Bree's initial shock gave way to quiet sobs. I don't understand, she kept saying. Dad wouldn't do this. The pain in her voice broke my heart all over again. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I wish it weren't true." "How long?" she asked suddenly. "How long has he been with her?" "About 14 months, according to what I've found." 14 months? Her voice rose in disbelief. "But that's when I graduated. He was there. He seemed normal. He gave that toast about family being everything." The memory hit me hard. Benjamin had indeed given a beautiful speech at Bree's graduation dinner, his eyes misty as he praised her accomplishments and expressed how proud we both were. To think that he had been living a double life even then, it made the betrayal even more profound. People are complicated, Bree. Your father loves you. That part is real, even if other parts of his life weren't what they seemed. Does Johnny? No? Not yet. I'm calling him next. "I should be there," she said suddenly. "I can book a flight. Be there tomorrow." "No, sweetheart. Finish your summer term. I'll come to you as soon as I'm back in the States, I promise." After assuring Bree I would fly to see her as soon as possible, and promising to keep her updated, I ended the call feeling emotionally drained. Carrie handed me a glass of water, which I accepted gratefully. "One down," I murmured. "You did well," she said, squeezing my shoulder gently. The call with Johnny went similarly. Shock, disbelief, pain. At 19, he was still finding his footing as an adult, and the news that his father had betrayed our family hit him particularly hard. "He was just texting me yesterday about financial advice for my summer internship," Johnny said, confusion evident in his voice. How could he be doing that while... People compartmentalize, I explained, though the justification felt hollow. "I don't think he stopped loving you, Johnny. His actions reflect his own issues, not his feelings. For you or Bree. Is he going to jail?" Johnny asked bluntly, always the pragmatic one. I hesitated. "It's possible. The financial aspects are serious, but it's too early to know for sure." "This is going to be all over campus, isn't it? Everyone knows Dad. My professors use his investment strategies in their examples." I hadn't even considered that dimension, how this would affect Johnny's experience at the business school where Benjamin was considered something of a legend. "We'll figure it out," I said, wishing I had something more concrete to offer. "Together, what?" "About you, Mom. Are you okay?" The question caught me off guard. In the midst of everything, I hadn't expected my teenage son to be concerned about my emotional state. "I'm managing," I said honestly. "It helps to have Carrie here." "Good. You shouldn't be alone." He paused. "Bree just texted me. She's freaking out." "Call her," I suggested. "You two should talk. Support each other." "Yeah, I will." Another pause. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too, Johnny." After both difficult conversations, I sat in silence, emotionally exhausted, but oddly at peace. The hardest part, telling our children, was done. Now we could all begin processing this new reality together. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. I expected it to be Bree or Johnny with follow-up questions, but instead, it was Benjamin. "The children called me. They're devastated. I hope you're satisfied." The accusatory tone reignited a flash of anger. I started to type a heated response, then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "They deserved to hear the truth from us before seeing it elsewhere. How you rebuild your relationship with them is up to you." I set the phone down, determined not to engage further. Benjamin's attempts to shift blame were predictable but no longer effective. Carrie watched me with concern. "You okay?" "Better than I expected," I admitted. Telling the kids was awful, but also clarifying somehow. Like the final confirmation that this is really happening. The villa staff appeared to ask about dinner arrangements, and I made decisions about the menu with a strange sense of normalcy. Life continued, even in the midst of personal upheaval. Dishes still needed to be selected. Meals still needed to be eaten. Later, as we sat down to a simple but elegant dinner of grilled fish and local vegetables, Carrie raised her wine glass. To survival, I clinked my glass against hers. To more than survival. To whatever comes next. After dinner, unable to sleep despite my emotional exhaustion, I wandered onto the terrace. The night was warm, the sky a canvas of stars more vibrant than I'd ever seen in the city. The beauty of this place, a beauty I had dreamed of sharing, with Benjamin, remained unchanged despite everything that had transpired. From the terrace, I could see the lights of nearby villas dotting the cliffside, each one representing lives unfolding in their own complex ways. How many other dramas were playing out behind those picturesque white walls? How many other marriages were thriving or failing in this paradise? A shooting star streaked across the sky, and I found myself making a wish, not for reconciliation or revenge, but for peace. Peace for our children as they processed their father's betrayal. Peace for myself as I navigated this unexpected chapter. Even peace for Benjamin, eventually, once justice had been served. The gentle sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below provided a soothing rhythm, reminding me that some things remained constant, even as others changed dramatically. The tide would come in and go out again tomorrow, just as it had for centuries, indifferent to human dramas. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I would survive this. Not just survive, but emerge stronger, wiser, more fully myself. Benjamin had taken so much from me, but he couldn't take my future unless I allowed it. As I finally returned to my bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, eyes tired but clear, posture straight despite the emotional weight I carried. The woman looking back at me was changed already, forged in the fire of betrayal but not consumed by it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal consultations, financial discussions, more conversations with Bree and Johnny. But for the first time in months, I faced those challenges without the shadow of suspicion and uncertainty. The truth, however painful, had set me free. I slipped between the cool sheets, and to my surprise, sleep came quickly. My last conscious thought was not of Benjamin or Susan, or even my children, but of myself, the self I was reclaiming, one conscious breath at a time. The next 3 days passed in a strange blend of legal consultations and unexpected moments of peace. Mornings were devoted to calls with Joel and Abe as they navigated the increasingly complex financial investigation. Benjamin's firm had initiated an internal audit, and preliminary findings supported everything Abe had discovered, and then some. "They've frozen his accounts," Joel informed me during our daily update. "And the board has voted to remove him from his position, effective immediately." I sat on the terrace with my coffee, absorbing this news. That was fast. They're in damage control mode. The evidence was overwhelming, and they need to distance themselves quickly to preserve client confidence. Joel adjusted his glasses, a habit I'd noticed when he had more difficult news to deliver. "There's something else. The firm is considering legal action against Benjamin separate from any criminal charges. They're concerned about reputational damage." "What does that mean for the divorce proceedings?" I asked. "It complicates things," he admitted. "If the firm pursues civil litigation, they may try to claim assets that would otherwise be part of the marital estate." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "So, even the divorce gets more complex because of his actions." "Unfortunately, yes. But we're staying ahead of it. Abe has been working with their forensic team to establish clear timelines of which assets were acquired legitimately versus those tied to questionable transactions." After the call ended, I remained at the terrace table, watching the morning light play across the Aegean. The speed with which Benjamin's carefully constructed life was unraveling should have brought me satisfaction. Instead, I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and sadness. Not for Benjamin, but for what could have been if he'd made different choices. Carrie emerged from her room, already dressed for the day in linen pants and a light blouse. "More bad news?" she asked, noting my expression. "Just complications," I replied. "Benjamin's firm is cutting ties completely. Possible civil litigation." She nodded, unsurprised. "Standard procedure. They need to show clients and regulators they're taking decisive action." "I keep thinking about his colleagues," I said. "People like Abe Gordon, who've worked with Benjamin for years. They must feel so betrayed." "Professional betrayal hits differently," Carrie agreed, pouring herself coffee. "But that's not your burden to carry, Mindy." "I know. It's just the ripple effects keep expanding." Carrie studied me for a moment. "What do you need? Today? More legal strategizing or a break from all of it?" I considered the question seriously. Since discovering Benjamin's betrayal, I had been in constant motion, investigating, planning, confronting. Even here in Santorini, surrounded by beauty, my mornings had been consumed by legal discussions and financial analysis. "A break," I decided suddenly. "Just for today. I need to remember there's a world beyond Benjamin's betrayal." Carrie smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've already looked into options. We could take a cooking class, go wine tasting at a local vineyard, or hike the path from Fira de Oya." "The hike," I said without hesitation. "I need to move, to feel my body working for something besides stress management." An hour later, we were on the famous hiking trail that wound along the caldera's edge. The path offered spectacular views of the volcanic basin and the whitewashed villages that clung to the cliffside. The physical exertion felt cleansing somehow, my muscles working in harmony after months of tension. "I can't believe I almost missed this," I said, pausing to take in a particularly breathtaking vista. "If I'd stayed locked in that villa, drowning in legal details—" "But you didn't," Carrie pointed out. "That's what matters." As we continued walking, the conversation shifted to topics we hadn't discussed in months: movies, books, politics, Carrie's dating life. For stretches of time, I forgot about Benjamin entirely, lost in the simple pleasure of friendship and movement. We stopped for lunch at a small taverna in Imerovigli, the highest point of the island. Over fresh Greek salad and tzatziki, I found myself laughing at Carrie's story about a disastrous court case involving feuding neighbors and an escaped pet iguana. "I haven't heard you laugh like that in months," she observed. I paused, realizing she was right. "I guess I haven't had much reason to." "You will again," she said confidently. "This part, the pain, the legal mess, the adjustment. It's just a chapter, not the whole story." After lunch, we continued our hike, eventually reaching Oya as the afternoon light began to soften. The iconic blue-domed churches and cascading white buildings were even more spectacular in person than in the countless photographs I'd seen while planning this trip. "It's weird," I said, as we wandered through the narrow streets. "I researched all of this so carefully, planning the perfect anniversary trip, finding the most romantic restaurants, the best sunset views, the ideal excursions. And now," Carrie prompted, "now I'm seeing it all anyway, just differently, without the pressure of creating perfect romantic memories." We passed a small jewelry shop where the artisan was working on a silver piece in the window. Something about the craftsmanship caught my eye, and I paused to watch his hands moving with practiced precision. "Want to go in?" Carrie asked. Inside, the small shop was filled with handcrafted pieces that reflected Greek mythology and symbolism. While Carrie examined a display of earrings, I found myself drawn to a simple silver pendant shaped like a phoenix. "You have good taste," the shopkeeper said, noticing my interest. "The phoenix is special. It represents rebirth, transformation, rising from the ashes to begin again." The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it resonated deeply. I purchased the necklace and wore it out of the shop, my fingers occasionally rising to touch the cool metal against my skin. By the time we returned to the villa, the sun was beginning to set, painting the white buildings in shades of gold and rose. We'd arranged for a private dinner on our terrace, and the staff had outdone themselves. Candles flickered in hurricane lamps, local wine was chilling in an ice bucket, and the smell of fresh seafood wafted from covered platters. This is technically our anniversary dinner, I realized aloud. The one I planned months ago. Carrie looked concerned. We can cancel. Do something else. No, I said firmly. This is perfect, just not in the way I expected. As we settled, at the table, Carrie raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings, she said. I touched my glass to hers. To rising from the ashes. We were interrupted by my phone buzzing with an incoming email from Joel. The subject line read, Settlement. Proposal urgent. Benjamin's lawyers have reached out, I told Carrie after reading the message. They're proposing a settlement structure. Joel thinks it's actually quite reasonable. That's unexpected, she said. What changed? According to Joel, the criminal investigation has rattled Benjamin. He's looking to resolve our situation quickly so he can focus on his legal defense. I scrolled through the details of the proposal. Benjamin was offering a clean division of our legitimate assets, with additional compensation from his personal accounts to make up for what he'd taken. He was relinquishing any claim to our primary residence and agreeing to my terms regarding spousal support. He's giving you everything you asked for, Carrie observed, reading over my shoulder. Not out of generosity, I noted. Out of necessity. He needs this resolved before the criminal case proceeds. Does it matter why? She asked. The outcome is the same. I considered her point. Did Benjamin's motivations matter if the result was fair? Perhaps not from a practical standpoint. Yet something in me needed more than just financial resolution. I drafted a reply to Joel. The terms are acceptable with one addition. I want a letter from Benjamin, not his lawyers, not a form apology, but from him personally, acknowledging what he did and taking full responsibility. Not for legal purposes, but for me. Carrie raised an eyebrow. Do you think he'll do it? I don't know, I admitted. But it's important to me. I spent months questioning my perceptions, my worth, my understanding of our marriage. I need him to acknowledge the reality of what happened, not for public vindication, but for my own closure. She nodded, understanding. I hope he has that much decency left. As we returned to our meal, I felt a shift in my perspective. Subtle, but significant. For the first time since discovering Benjamin's betrayal, I was making demands based on my emotional needs, not just practical considerations. I was acknowledging that my healing mattered, that my truth deserved recognition. Later that evening, Carrie excused herself to take a call from her office, leaving me alone on the terrace. The night had turned cool, and I wrapped a light shawl around my shoulders as I gazed at the constellation of lights from villages dotting the Caldera Rim. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize with a Santorini area code. Curious, I answered. Mrs. Harrington? A woman's voice asked. This is Susan. My heart skipped a beat. Susan, I'm surprised to hear from you. I'm still on the island, she said, her voice tight with tension. I couldn't get a flight out until tomorrow. I see. I kept my tone neutral, unsure where this conversation was heading. I need to talk to you, she continued. In person, if possible. There are things you should know. Things about Benjamin. That might be relevant to your situation. My initial instinct was to refuse. What could Susan possibly tell me that would matter now? Yet something in her voice, a note of desperation tinged with determination, gave me pause. Why would you want to help me? I asked bluntly. I'm not doing it for you, she replied with equal directness. I'm doing it because it's right, and because I'm angry too. I considered her request. Meeting with my husband's mistress certainly wasn't on my Santorini itinerary, but then again, nothing about this trip had gone according to plan. "There's a cafe in Fira," I said finally. "Cafe Gallini. I can meet you there tomorrow morning at 9. "Thank you," she said, sounding genuinely relieved. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I sat with the strangeness of the moment. 24. Hours ago, I would have said Susan was the last person I'd willingly meet for coffee. Now, I found myself curious about what she might reveal. When Carrie returned, I told her about the call. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "What if it's some kind of trap?" "What kind of trap could it be?" I countered. "The confrontation already happened. The divorce is proceeding. What more could either of them take from me?" "Your peace of mind," Carrie suggested. "This could be Benjamin using her to manipulate you emotionally." I considered this possibility. Maybe. But my instinct says she's acting on her own. She sounded angry, betrayed. "Join the club," Carrie muttered. "Exactly." Which makes me think whatever she wants to share could be legitimate. I twisted the phoenix pendant between my fingers. Besides, I can handle it. If it's manipulation, I'll walk away. If it's useful information, I'll listen. Carrie didn't look convinced but nodded. "I'm coming with you." "I expected nothing less," I said with a small smile. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, Joel called with Benjamin's response to my settlement condition. "He's agreed to write the letter," Joel said, sounding slightly surprised himself. "Really? Just like that?" "He wants to meet with you one more time before you leave Santorini," Joel added, "to deliver it in person and formalize everything." The request gave me pause. Did I want to see Benjamin again? Could I face him without reigniting the pain and anger I was working so hard to process? "You don't have to decide now," Joel assured me. "Think about it. There's no legal requirement for an in-person meeting." "I'll let you know tomorrow," I promised before ending the call. That night, standing on the terrace under a canopy of stars, I unclasped my wedding ring for the first time in 20 years. The platinum band felt heavier than I remembered as I held it in my palm, considering what to do with this symbol of promises broken. For a moment, I thought about throwing it into the sea below, a dramatic gesture of finality. Instead, I simply placed it in the small jewelry box I'd brought on the trip. Perhaps someday I would repurpose the metal into something new, something that represented who I was becoming, rather than who I had been. As I closed the box, I caught sight of my reflection. In the dresser mirror, the woman who looked back at me was unfamiliar in subtle ways. Her posture straighter, her eyes clearer, her expression more resolute. She looked tired, yes, but also stronger somehow. I thought about the day ahead, meeting Susan in the morning, potentially seeing Benjamin again before leaving Santorini. A week ago, either prospect would have terrified me. Now I felt capable of handling both encounters with dignity and purpose. This, I realized, was the beginning of my transformation. Not a dramatic phoenix-like rebirth, but a gradual reclaiming of my strength, my agency, my sense of self outside of Benjamin's betrayal. The woman who had arrived in Santorini a week ago, anxious, betrayed, seeking confirmation of her worst fears, was already fading. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer about her worth, and unexpectedly hopeful about the future. I touched the phoenix pendant one last time before slipping beneath the cool sheets. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, perhaps new pain. But it would also bring me one step closer to the woman I was becoming, the woman I needed to be for the chapters ahead. The next morning dawned clear and brilliant, sunlight streaming through the gauzy curtains of my bedroom. I dressed carefully for my meeting with Susan, choosing clothes that made me feel confident. A simple linen dress in a deep blue that Bree always said brought out my eyes, paired with the phoenix pendant and comfortable but elegant sandals. Carrie was already on the terrace, sipping coffee and reviewing emails on her tablet. She looked up as I joined her. "Ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, pouring myself coffee from the carafe. "My offer to accidentally spill hot coffee on her still stands," Carrie said with a wry smile. I laughed, despite my nerves. "I appreciate your loyalty, but let's see what she has to say first." We arrived at Cafe Gallini a few minutes early. The small establishment was perched on the cliff edge, offering spectacular views with its outdoor seating. I chose a table in the corner, positioning myself so I could see Susan approach. She arrived precisely at 9, her confident stride belying any nervousness she might feel. She'd changed from the polished executive assistant I'd met at the villa. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a white blouse, her face bare except for minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. As she spotted us, I saw her take a deep breath before approaching. Carrie shifted slightly beside me, her posture protective. "Thank you for meeting me," Susan said, her voice steady as she took the seat across from us. "I know this is unusual." "That's certainly one word for it," I replied. "Why did you want to see me, Susan?" She glanced at Carrie questioningly. "This is Carrie Wilson," I said. "My attorney and friend. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of her." Susan nodded, accepting this boundary. She ordered a coffee from the hovering waiter, then turned back to me. "After I left the villa," she began, "I went directly to the airport, hoping to get a flight out. While waiting, I started going through my emails and texts, trying to understand how I could have been so completely fooled. The waiter returned with her coffee. She added sugar with methodical precision, clearly gathering her thoughts. "I met Benjamin 14 months ago at a financial conference in Chicago," she continued. "I wasn't his assistant then. I worked for a competitor, actually. He was charming, attentive, and very clear that his marriage was essentially over." She met my gaze directly. "He told me you had agreed to stay together in name only until your children were established." "That was a lie," I said simply. "I know that now," she acknowledged. "But at the time, I believed him. I had no reason not to. He showed me divorce papers, said you'd filed months ago and were just working through the financial settlement." "Another lie," I noted. "There were never any divorce papers." Susan nodded. "After a few months, he offered me the position at his firm. Said it would be easier for us to be together, and I'd be advancing my career at the same time. It seemed perfect." "When did you realize things weren't what they seemed?" Carrie asked. Susan traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. "There were small inconsistencies. Times when he'd cancel plans suddenly. Calls he wouldn't take in front of me. But he always had plausible explanations." She sighed. "I'm not proud of how willingly I accepted them." I studied her carefully, searching for manipulative intent, but finding only what appeared to be genuine regret. "What changed?" I prompted. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Two things," she said. "First, what I learned at the villa. That there was no divorce in process. That you had no idea about us. That everything Benjamin told me about your marriage was a lie. And the second thing?" Susan reached into her bag and withdrew a USB drive, placing it on the table between us. "This. After I left the villa, I started going through every email, every document Benjamin had ever shared with me. I found things that concerned me. Financial documents, I guessed." She nodded. "Exactly. I'm not a forensic accountant, but I worked in finance long enough to recognize irregular transactions. There are emails here discussing movements of funds that seemed questionable. Benjamin was careful, but not careful enough. Why give this to me?" I asked. Why not go directly to the authorities? Because I don't know if I'm implicated, she admitted, her voice dropping. Some of these transactions involved accounts I had access to as his assistant. I never authorized anything improper, but my name is on documents. My signature. Carrie leaned forward. You're concerned about legal exposure. Wouldn't you be? Susan countered. I've already contacted an attorney. They advised me to cooperate fully, but I wanted you to have this information first. Why? I pressed. Why would you do anything to help me? Susan met my gaze directly. Because he betrayed. Me too. Differently, but just as thoroughly. And because, she hesitated, because I saw your face when you realized what was happening. I know that pain. Carrie reached for the USB drive, but I placed my hand over it first. If I take this, I said to Susan, and there's evidence of criminal activity, I'll have to share it with the authorities. There's no protection I can offer you. I understand, she said. I'm prepared for the consequences. I just want to do the right thing, finally. I picked up the drive, feeling the weight of it, physical and metaphorical, in my palm. Thank you. Susan nodded, then stood to leave. There's one more thing you should know, she said. Benjamin called me last night. He wanted to meet, to explain. I refused. What did he want to explain? I asked. I don't know, she replied. And frankly, I don't care. His explanations, his justifications, they don't matter anymore. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. Good luck, Mindy. I truly am sorry for my part in all of this. As she walked away, Carrie turned to me with raised eyebrows. Well, that was unexpected. Yes, I agreed, turning the USB drive over in my hand. But potentially valuable. Should I have Joel examine the contents before your meeting with Benjamin? I considered this. Yes, if there's something significant here, I want to know before I see him. We spent the remainder of the morning exploring Fira's winding streets, window shopping and enjoying the spectacular views. I found myself surprisingly calm despite the impending meeting with Benjamin, as though each step I took, removing my ring, meeting with Susan, agreeing to see Benjamin one last time, was bringing me closer to closure. Have you decided? Carrie asked as we paused to admire hand-woven textiles in a small shop. About meeting Benjamin? Yes, I said with certainty. I'm going to do it, not for him, but for me. I need to close this chapter properly. And the letter he's writing? I'll read it, but with realistic expectations. Words come easily to Benjamin. It's the actions that matter. As we continued exploring, my phone buzzed with a message from Joel. USB contents reviewed. Significant evidence of additional financial misconduct. Call when you can. I showed the message to Carrie. Sounds like Susan delivered after all. Interesting timing, she noted. Right before your meeting with Benjamin. You still think it's manipulation? I asked. Carrie considered this. Not necessarily. It could be genuine remorse, self-preservation, or a bit of both. Either way, the information appears valuable. Called Joel from a quiet corner of a nearby cafe. His assessment was blunt and concerning. The documents on this drive are quite damning, he explained. They show a pattern of transactions going back further than we initially discovered. Almost 2 years. And they implicate others at the firm, not just Benjamin. Others? I asked, surprised. Who? At least 2 senior partners appear to have knowledge of the activities. There are email exchanges discussing the movement of funds that are clearly irregular. Does this change our strategy for the divorce? Potentially, Joel admitted. It strengthens our position, certainly, but it also complicates things. The criminal investigation could expand significantly. The firm might face regulatory action. I thought about the ripple effects. How many more lives would be affected by what had begun as a personal betrayal? It was overwhelming to consider. What? Should I do with this information when I meet Benjamin? I asked. That depends on what you want from the meeting, Joel replied. If your goal is closure on personal terms, bringing up the new evidence might derail that conversation. If you're looking to strengthen your legal position, mentioning it could be strategic. After ending the call, I shared the details with Carrie, who listened with increasing concern. This is bigger than just Benjamin's midlife crisis and affair, she noted. This is systematic fraud involving multiple parties. I know, I said, feeling the weight of the situation anew. It makes my marital problems seem almost insignificant by comparison. Not insignificant, Carrie corrected. Just part of a larger pattern of deception. She paused. How do you want to handle the meeting with Benjamin? I considered the question carefully. What did I really want from this final encounter? Was it about strengthening my legal position? Or was it about emotional closure? I need to think, I said finally. We returned to the villa in early afternoon. While Carrie made some work calls, I changed into my swimsuit and headed to the infinity pool. There was something about floating in water, suspended, weightless, that helped me think more clearly. The revelation from Susan and Joel's assessment of the documents had shifted the landscape yet again. What had begun as a confrontation about infidelity had evolved into something far more complex, with implications beyond our marriage and divorce. As I floated on my back, staring at the endless blue sky, I thought about the woman I had been when I first discovered Benjamin's messages, hurt, betrayed, but also determined to uncover the truth. I had approached the situation methodically, gathering evidence, building a case, seeking justice. That approach had served me well. It had empowered me during a time when I might otherwise have been paralyzed by pain. It had given me a framework for processing Benjamin's betrayal beyond the emotional devastation. But now, as I prepared to meet him one last time, I wondered if a different approach might be needed, not abandoning the evidence or the legal strategy, but focusing on what I needed emotionally to move forward. Benjamin's letter, his acknowledgement of what he had done and his acceptance of responsibility, that was what I had requested. Not for legal purposes, but for my own healing. It was a step toward closure that no amount of financial settlement could provide. Did the additional evidence change that need? Perhaps it made it even more essential. Benjamin had not just betrayed our marriage. He had participated in a larger pattern of deception that had hurt many others. His acknowledgement needed to encompass the full scope of his actions. I climbed. Out of the pool, my mind clearer now. The key was to separate the personal from the legal. Joel and his team would handle the financial implications, the criminal investigation, the divorce proceedings. My focus for the meeting with Benjamin would be on what I needed to say and hear to close this chapter of my life. As I wrapped myself in a towel, my phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. Confirmed for dinner tomorrow at Aegean Terrace, 7 p.m. I'll have the letter. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I stared at the message, feeling a strange sense of detachment. The man who had been the center of my world for 20 years was now just another appointment on my calendar, one more item to check off before leaving Santorini. When Carrie returned from her calls, I shared my decision with her. I'm going to meet with Benjamin as planned, I said. I won't mention the USB drive or the new evidence unless he brings it up. This meeting is about closure for me, not legal strategy. Carrie nodded, accepting my decision. I think that's wise. Joel will handle the legal implications regardless. Exactly. This is my chance to say what I need to say, to hear what I need to hear, and then move forward. Do you want me to come with you? She offered. I considered this. No, I think I need to do this alone, but maybe you could be nearby? Just in case. Of course, she agreed. I'll find a place close to the restaurant. Text me if you need anything. That evening, we booked a sunset boat cruise around the caldera, another activity I had originally planned for Benjamin and me. As our small vessel glided through the tranquil waters, I found myself enjoying the experience without the shadow of what might have been. The boat's captain, a weathered local man named Dmitri, shared stories about the volcanic formation of Santorini, pointing out geological features visible in the steep cliffs. Many people think it's sad, the destruction, he explained in accented English. But from this great eruption came great beauty. This is life, no? From endings come new beginnings. The simple philosophy resonated deeply. I thought of the phoenix pendant against my skin, symbolizing rebirth from ashes. Perhaps Dmitri was right. Perhaps every ending contained the seeds of something new, if we were brave enough to nurture them. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky and sea in spectacular shades of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever tomorrow's meeting with Benjamin might bring, I was ready for it. Not because I had all the answers or because the pain had disappeared, but because I had reclaimed something essential, my belief in my own strength, my own worthiness, my own future. The boat turned back toward the shore, the white buildings of Santorini glowing golden in the fading light. We had come full circle, returning to where we began, but with everything changed. The perfect metaphor for my journey through betrayal and toward whatever lay ahead. That night, standing on the terrace under a canopy of stars, I unclasped my wedding ring for the first time in 20 years. The platinum band felt heavier than I remembered as I held it in my palm, considering what to do with this symbol of promises broken. For a moment, I thought about throwing it into the sea below, a dramatic gesture of finality. Instead, I simply placed it in the small jewelry box I'd brought on the trip. Perhaps someday I would repurpose the metal into something new, something that represented who I was becoming rather than who I had been. The woman who had arrived in Santorini a week ago, anxious, betrayed, seeking confirmation of her worst fears, was already fading. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer about her worth, and unexpectedly hopeful about the future. Tomorrow I would face Benjamin one last time, but tonight, under the vast Greek sky, I was already free. The restaurant Benjamin had chosen for our final meeting was perched on the cliff edge in Oya, offering panoramic views of the caldera. It was exactly the kind of place we would have celebrated our anniversary, elegant without being pretentious, romantic without being cliché. The irony wasn't lost on me as I followed the host to the secluded table where Benjamin was waiting. He stood when he saw me approach, a gesture of respect that seemed almost comical given everything that had transpired. He looked different, diminished somehow. The confident, commanding presence he had always projected was muted, replaced by a man who appeared to have aged years in the span of a week. "Thank you for coming," he said as I took my seat across from him. I nodded, taking in his appearance, more carefully. His usually immaculate clothes seemed rumpled, his face drawn with new lines of stress. I felt a flicker of something, not quite pity, but a recognition of his humanity beneath the betrayal. "Joel said you've agreed to all the terms," I began, preferring to focus on the practical matters at hand. "Yes," Benjamin confirmed. "Everything will be finalized once we return to the States. The division of assets, the house, the financial arrangements, it's all as you requested. And the letter?" He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the table between us. "It's all there. Everything you asked for." I made no move to take it. "Did you mean what you wrote?" Benjamin met my gaze directly for the first time. "Every word." A waiter approached with water and menus, momentarily interrupting the tension. After he departed, Benjamin spoke again. "I've had a lot of time to think this past week, about what I did, about why I did it. And what conclusions have you reached?" I asked, genuinely curious despite myself. He looked out at the sea, gathering his thoughts. I don't think I ever recovered from losing the Porter account last year. The reference surprised me. The Porter Group had been Benjamin's largest client for nearly a decade until they unexpectedly moved their substantial portfolio to a competitor. It was more than just the money, he continued. It was what it represented. For the first time in my career, I wasn't the golden boy anymore. I was replaceable. He gave a hollow laugh. I know how that sounds. Poor successful Benjamin facing a minor setback. So you started taking money and pursuing a younger woman to prove you weren't replaceable. The question came out sharper than I intended. He flinched but didn't deny it. I told myself it was temporary, just moving some funds around to cover a rough period, just enjoying some attention from someone who still looked at me with admiration. He shook his head. But temporary solutions have a way of becoming permanent problems. The waiter returned for our orders. Benjamin requested a bottle of wine, but I declined, opting for sparkling water instead. I wanted complete clarity for this conversation. When did you decide to leave? I asked after the waiter departed. Was there a specific moment? Benjamin considered the question carefully. I don't think it was ever a single decision. More like a series of small choices, each one taking me further from our marriage. He paused. But if I had to identify a turning point, it was probably when you mentioned expanding your consultancy internationally, just as I had suspected. Because I wanted something for myself. Because it forced me to see you as completely independent of me, he corrected. You didn't need me anymore, not really. You had your own success, your own ambitions. The kids were grown, and I just panicked. So instead of talking to me about your feelings, you decided to create a backup life. He nodded, shame evident in his expression. Susan represented everything I was afraid of losing. Youth, admiration, a future with possibilities still ahead instead of behind. He sighed. It sounds pathetic when I say it out loud. It is pathetic, I agreed without malice. But also human. We all fear becoming irrelevant. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, setting them down with practiced flourish. Neither of us made a move to eat. The financial aspects, I said after a moment. Those go beyond a midlife crisis. Benjamin's face darkened. That's the part I'm still struggling to explain, even to myself. It started small, just moving some money to cover personal expenses Susan and I incurred. But then it became, I don't know, a game, almost, seeing what I could get away with. People lost their savings, Benjamin, their retirements, their children's, college funds. I know, he said quietly. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. My lawyer has worked out a deal with the prosecutors. I'll plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for helping recover as much of the money as possible. The news wasn't surprising, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Benjamin, my husband of 20 years, father of my children, the man who had once embodied stability and success, would likely go to prison. How much time? I asked. 3 to 5 years, depending on how the restitution goes. His voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes. I'll be nearly 60 when I get out. I absorbed this information silently. Part of me had expected to feel triumphant at seeing Benjamin face consequences. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of sadness for what had been lost and relief that justice would be served. What will you tell the children? I asked. The truth, he said without hesitation. All of it. They deserve that much. I've already asked Bree if she'll meet me when she's ready. Johnny still isn't responding to my messages, but I'll keep trying. I nodded, appreciating at least this evidence of responsibility. They'll come around eventually. They love you, despite everything. I don't deserve their forgiveness, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Or yours. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, I replied. It's about choosing to release the pain someone caused you. And I'm not there yet, Benjamin. Maybe someday, but not today. He accepted this with a small nod. Fair enough. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the spectacular view and elegant food a surreal backdrop to our conversation about betrayal and consequences. What about you? Benjamin asked eventually. What happens next for Mindy Harrington? The question gave me pause. What did come next? For so long, my identity had been tied to our marriage, to being Benjamin's wife and Bree and Johnny's mother. Who was I beyond those roles? First, I said, I won't be Mindy Harrington anymore. I'm going back to my maiden name. Benjamin looked surprised but didn't comment. Beyond that, I don't know exactly, I continued. I'm expanding the consultancy, definitely. Maybe I'll take that sabbatical in London after all. Travel. Rediscover parts of myself I set aside during our marriage. You'll be fine, Benjamin said with surprising sincerity. Better than fine. You were always the strongest one. I didn't deny it. Yes, I will be. As the meal drew to a close, I finally reached for the envelope containing Benjamin's letter. I didn't open it, simply tucked it into my purse for later. Thank you for this, I said, gesturing vaguely to encompass our meeting, the letter, the closure it represented. It's the least I could do, he replied. Literally the absolute minimum. The hint of self-deprecating humor, so reminiscent of the Benjamin I had fallen in love with decades ago, caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the man he had been before. Ambition and insecurity had twisted him into someone I no longer recognized. As we prepared to leave, Benjamin hesitated. This is really goodbye, isn't it? As husband and wife, yes, I confirmed. We'll still be connected through our children, through the divorce proceedings, through the practical matters of untangling 2 decades of shared life. But this part of our story is over. He nodded, accepting the finality of it. I really did love you, Mindy. Not well enough, obviously. But I did. I know, I said, and meant it. I loved you too. We walked together to the restaurant entrance where our paths would quite literally diverge. Benjamin to his hotel on one side of the island, me to the villa on the other. No kiss goodbye, no embrace, just a final nod of acknowledgement before turning away from each other. As I walked back alone, the Santorini sunset painted the white buildings in shades of gold and rose. I touched the phoenix pendant at my neck, a physical reminder of what this week had taught me. Endings, even painful ones, create space for new beginnings. Back at the villa, I found Carrie on the terrace with a glass of wine, watching the same sunset I had admired during my walk. She looked up expectantly as I joined her. How did it go? She asked. I settled into the chair beside her, exhaling deeply. Better than expected. Worse than I hoped. Exactly as it needed to. She smiled at my contradictory assessment. That sounds about right for ending a 20-year marriage. The waiter appeared with a glass of wine for me without being asked. Carrie had anticipated my need perfectly. I took a grateful sip before continuing. He's taking a plea deal, 3 to 5 years. Carrie nodded. Joel mentioned that was likely. It's strange, I mused. I spent months imagining confronting Benjamin, exposing his betrayal, watching him face consequences. Now that it's actually happening, I just feel sad. Not for myself, exactly. More for what could have been if he'd made different choices. That's perfectly normal, Carrie assured me. You're mourning the future you thought you had. The future I thought we had, I corrected her. The one where we grew old together, doted on grandchildren, traveled during retirement. And now? I touched the phoenix pendant at my neck, considering her question. Now, I'm building a different future. One that's entirely my own. We sat in comfortable silence, watching as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon. The sky transitioned from brilliant orange to deep purple, stars beginning to appear one by one. "He gave me a letter," I said finally, withdrawing the envelope from my purse. "His formal acknowledgement of everything. I haven't read it yet." "Are you going to?" I turned the envelope over in my hands. "Yes, but not tonight. Tonight I want to enjoy this view, this wine, this moment without Benjamin's words in my head." Carrie raised her glass. "To Benjamin-free moments." I clinked my glass against hers. "And to many more of them." The next morning, I woke early and took my coffee to the small private balcony outside my bedroom. The rising sun cast long shadows across the caldera, the sea below still and peaceful. It was my last full day in Santorini. We were scheduled to fly back to the States tomorrow, and I wanted to savor every moment. After finishing my coffee, I finally opened Benjamin's letter. His familiar handwriting filled several pages, the penmanship more uneven than I remembered, as though his hand had trembled while writing. "Dear Mindy, first, I want to say that nothing I write here is meant as an excuse or justification for my actions. There is no excuse for betraying you, our children, and the life we built together. What I did was unforgivable on every level. I violated the trust of our marriage by pursuing a relationship with Susan. I lied repeatedly, not just about the affair, but about countless small things that accumulated into a wall of deception between us. I made unilateral decisions about our future without consulting you. I prioritized my desires and insecurities over our family's well-being. The financial crimes were equally inexcusable. I began by borrowing from accounts I managed, telling myself I would replace the funds before anyone noticed. But like most lies, this one grew until it became unmanageable. I betrayed not just you, but clients who trusted me with their life savings. I've agreed to cooperate fully with authorities to help recover as much money as possible, though I know this doesn't erase the harm I've caused. You asked why this happened. The honest answer is both simple and complex. The simple part is that I was weak. I faced challenges, both personal and professional, and instead of confronting them honorably, I took the coward's path. I sought external validation rather than internal strength. I blamed others for my failures rather than taking responsibility. The geeky, complex part involves acknowledging patterns that developed throughout our marriage. I grew accustomed to a certain image of myself: successful, respected, in control. When that image was threatened, I made desperate choices to preserve it rather than adapting to change. Instead of growing with you, I resented your growth. Instead of supporting your dreams, I saw them as threatening mine. None of this is your fault. You did everything right, as a wife, a mother, a partner. The failure was entirely mine. I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. What I hope is that someday you'll find peace despite what I've done. That our children will understand my actions reflect my failures, not theirs. That the pain I've caused will eventually fade, allowing all of you to move forward without the burden of my betrayal weighing you down. You asked for honesty, and I've tried to provide it here. Too late to save what we had, but perhaps early enough to help you close this chapter with clarity. With sincere regret and respect, Benjamin and I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. The words were everything I had asked for: honest, direct, unqualified in accepting responsibility. Yet I felt surprisingly detached from them, as though they described someone else's marriage, someone else's pain. Perhaps that was progress, the ability to see our story as just that. A story, with a beginning, middle, and now an end. Not the whole of my existence, but merely a chapter, albeit a significant one. As I prepared for my last day in Santorini, I found myself making plans. Not just for the immediate future, but for the life I wanted to create moving forward. I would complete the London expansion of my consultancy. I would visit Brie at university more frequently. I would take that cooking class I'd always been interested in but never found time for. Carrie joined me for breakfast, her luggage already packed and waiting by the door. What's on the agenda for our last day in paradise? I was thinking we could take the boat tour around the volcano, I suggested. It's supposedly one of the must-do experiences here. Perfect, she agreed. A fitting way to end this very unexpected vacation. Hours later, as our tour boat circled the volcanic island at the center of the caldera, I found myself fascinated by our guide's explanation of how Santorini had been formed. The beautiful crescent-shaped island was actually the remaining edge of a massive volcanic eruption thousands of years ago. The destruction created something new, the guide explained in accented English, gesturing to the stunning landscape around us. Without the eruption, there would be no Santorini as we know it today. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Sometimes it takes a catastrophic event to create something beautiful and unexpected. My marriage had erupted spectacularly, but from that destruction, a new landscape was emerging, one shaped by painful experience but no less stunning for it. That evening, our last in Greece, Carrie and I dined at a small taverna tucked away from the main tourist areas. The owner, an elderly woman with a weathered face and bright eyes, served us herself, insisting we try her homemade baklava for dessert. "Special occasion?" she asked in limited English, noticing our multiple empty wine glasses and lingering meal. "A new beginning," I replied with a smile. She nodded as if she understood perfectly. "Kaylee Archie," she said, raising her own small glass of ouzo. "Good beginning. Kaylee Archie," Carrie and I repeated, clinking our glasses together. As we walked back to the villa under a canopy of stars, I realized that for the first time since discovering Benjamin's betrayal, I was thinking more about what lay ahead than what was behind me. The pain hadn't disappeared. I doubted it ever would completely, but it had transformed into something manageable, something that could coexist with hope and possibility. Tomorrow, we would board a plane and return to the complexities awaiting us: legal proceedings, conversations with the children, the practical dismantling of a shared life. But tonight, under the vast Greek sky, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine anticipation for the future. Not the future I had planned, but perhaps the one I needed. The London rain tapped gently against the windows of my corner office, a soothing backdrop to the quarterly review meeting I was conducting. Through the glass walls, I could see my team gathered around the conference table, engaged in animated discussion about our latest marketing campaign. The European expansion of Mindy Lawrence Consulting had exceeded even my most optimistic projections, with new clients signing on weekly and a growing reputation for innovative strategies in the financial sector. "I think we're done for today," I announced, closing my laptop. "Great work, everyone. Let's reconvene next week to finalize the Blackwell proposal." As the team filed out, my assistant Brie, not my daughter, but a bright Cambridge graduate I'd hired 6 months ago, lingered behind. "Don't forget you have dinner with your daughter tonight," she reminded me. "I've arranged for a car to pick you up at 7. "Thank you, Brie. What would I do without you?" "Probably miss half your appointments," she replied with a cheeky grin, before departing. Alone in my office, I took a moment to appreciate the view of the Thames and the London skyline beyond. The decision to relocate had been spontaneous by my standards, made within weeks of returning from Santorini, but it had proven transformative both professionally and personally. Leading the European division had reignited my passion for my work, while the distance from my former life had provided space to heal and rebuild. My phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from Johnny, sending a photo of his latest architectural model with the caption, "Final project before graduation. Dad says it reminds him of the beach house we used to visit." The casual mention of Benjamin no longer triggered pain or resentment. After serving 14 months of his 3-year sentence at a minimum security facility, he had been released early for good behavior and cooperation with authorities in recovering embezzled funds. His relationship with our children had slowly mended, not to what it had been before, but to something honest and sustainable. Our own interactions remained strictly practical, limited to occasional updates about the children or lingering financial matters. The divorce had been finalized 6 months after Santorini, with remarkably little conflict given the circumstances. Benjamin had honored all the terms of our settlement, even as his own financial situation deteriorated dramatically. I checked the time and began gathering my things for dinner with Bree, who was visiting London during her semester break. At 22, she had blossomed into a confident young woman with her father's analytical mind and my determination. The scandal surrounding Benjamin had been difficult for her, but she had processed it with remarkable resilience, even choosing to study abroad, partly to escape the whispers and judgment that had followed our family name. The car was waiting as promised when I exited the building. London's evening traffic moved sluggishly through rain-slicked streets, but I didn't mind. After the frantic pace of the workday, I welcomed the quiet moment to transition from business owner to mother. The restaurant I'd chosen was one of Bree's favorites, a cozy Italian place tucked away on a side street in Notting Hill. She was already waiting when I arrived, her face lighting up as she spotted me. "Mom!" She stood for a warm embrace. "You look amazing." "So do you, sweetheart." I took the seat across from her, taking in her glowing appearance. "London agrees with you." "It's not just London," she said with a secretive smile. "I've met someone." The conversation flowed easily as she told me about Martin, a British graduate, student she'd been dating for several months. I listened, genuinely delighted by her happiness, offering advice only when she asked for it. "Dad knows about him," she mentioned casually over dessert. "I showed him pictures during my last visit." "That's good," I said sincerely. "How is your father doing?" Bree's expression grew more serious. "Better, I think. The teaching position at the community college seems to be good for him. It's obviously not what he was used to, but he says he finds it satisfying to help students understand finance." She hesitated. "He asks about you sometimes." "What do you tell him?" "The truth. That you're thriving." That London was the right choice. She studied my face carefully. "It was, wasn't it?" "Absolutely," I confirmed. "The best decision I could have made." Later, after walking Bree to her Uber, I decided to stroll back to my flat despite the light drizzle. London at night had become one of my simple pleasures. The historic buildings illuminated against the dark sky, the mix of languages floating from restaurants and pubs, the sense of being part of something ancient yet constantly evolving. My flat was a modest 2-bedroom in a converted warehouse near the Thames, nothing like the sprawling suburban home I'd shared with Benjamin, but perfectly suited to my new life. The space was entirely mine, decorated according to my taste without compromise or consideration for anyone else's preferences. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of the phoenix pendant I still wore daily. Its significance had evolved over the months, less about rising from ashes now, more a reminder of my capacity for transformation and resilience. My phone chimed with a final message for the day, Carrie checking in from New York. Our friendship had deepened further since Santorini, strengthened by weekly video calls and regular visits in both directions. She had been my rock during the difficult months following my return to the States, and I had supported her through her own life changes, including a recent promotion to managing partner at her firm. Court date set for final distribution of recovered funds, her message read. Benjamin's cooperation means nearly 80% return to affected clients. Thought you'd want to know. I typed back a simple thank you before setting the phone aside. The news brought relief rather than vindication, a sense that some measure of justice had been achieved, some portion of the harm repaired. Lying in bed, Listening to the gentle rhythm of rain against the windows, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal in Santorini felt like a different person now, connected to me through memory and experience, but distinct in fundamental ways. That woman had defined herself primarily through her marriage, measuring her worth against the success of her relationship. She had absorbed Benjamin's priorities as her own, compromising her ambitions to support his, accepting his narrative about their shared life without question. The woman I had become was standing fully in her own power, professionally accomplished, emotionally resilient, genuinely content in her independence. The pain of betrayal had tempered into wisdom. The anger had dissolved, leaving clarity in its wake. As sleep approached, I found myself thinking of something my daughter had said during dinner. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us exactly where we need to be. At 22, she already understood what had taken me nearly 50 years to learn. Life rarely follows the path we envision, but the unexpected detours often lead to destinations more suited to who we truly are, or who we are becoming. Benjamin's betrayal had demolished the life I thought I wanted. In its place, I had built something authentic, fulfilling, and entirely my own. Not despite the pain, but because of it. Not in spite of the ending, but because of the new beginning it created. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected gift of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.